Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, America's #1 trusted resource for realtors who demand authentic, real-time coaching. Starring award-winning real estate coaches Tim and Julie Harris. Get ready for unfiltered, full-strength honesty about what is truly working to get you into action and make you money in this new real estate boom. Now to our hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
We have the distinct honor and privilege today to be joined by Dale Stinton, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Realtors. Dale is a 31-year veteran of the NAR, having served in a number of key pivotal roles in the organization and becoming CEO in November of 2005. Dale has received numerous awards and honors throughout his career, including Inman's 2010 Innovator of the Year, along with being featured as one of Smart Money Magazine's Power 30 Most Powerful and Influential Players in 2010, and named one of the 100 Most Influential Real Estate Leaders of the Year by Inman News in 2011 and 2012. Now, let's welcome Dale to the call as we join our host, Tim Harris.
So, Dale, the first obvious question is what happened with you and Inman News for 2013 and 2014 that you dropped off the most influential list?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Nice to be with you. I think I am on the list. I know I'm on the list for 13, and I don't know that 14 has come out yet. So, but I'm pretty confident that I am on there for those years too.
I think you were too. That was just an oversight in our notes, so I apologize for that.
Yeah.
So start off by letting our listeners know, and we talked a little bit about your background with the National Association of Realtors. I guess when we talk to our listeners and we're talking to them about the different things they're interested in hearing about, they are always really fascinated by what NAR does, and I guess there's nobody else better to tell us what NAR does than the guy that's running NAR. So could you give them a little bit of background on what specifically you did prior to being the CEO, and then we can get into more in-depth about what the National Association of Realtors does for those agents who don't understand. Sure,
yeah. So over 30 years ago, I came to NAR as a director of finance in that area, and basically made it my life's mission to study trade associations, and particularly NAR, since it's a very unique trade association. And after about 4 or 5 years of that, I was promoted to CFO, and I was the CFO for some 20 years, and then again was promoted up to CEO about 9 years ago. So it's been a marvelous career with NAR and with Realtors.
So even though the industry has obviously changed, especially during the past 10 years, what are the fundamentals that National Association stands for? What remains the same? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Fundamentally and foremost, if you look at our strategic plan, and we have a committee that does these kinds of things, and we strategic plan and vision all the time, but for 30 plus years, the strategic plan mission statement has consistently said two things: help our members in their business and protect private property rights. And in a nutshell, that's what we exist for, to help our members make money and to protect private property rights in this country, which is we believe, a fundamental right of every American in the country.
Founding principle of our country, I will go as far as to say, is the right to own property. So what's the biggest misconception that realtors have about the National Association of Realtors? Because there are a lot of misconceptions. A lot of agents are kind of confused about what we do.
Yeah, I've often thought about writing a paper or a book on the myths of organized real estate, of which there are many. But a few that come to mind is, and this is a humorous one, is some folks, realtors and consumers, think that somehow the National Association of Realtors, because we're so large and so effusive and so everywhere, they think we're actually a government agency, some type of element of the government, which of course we're not. We're a not-for-profit Illinois corporation headquartered in Chicago with a large office in Washington for all of our advocacy, but we fundamentally exist to represent realtors. We invented the term way back when doctors and others had that sort of ending to the term, and that's why we own the trademark realtor and the big R, if you will. And another misconception is that you have to join the National Association of Realtors. Not true. There are roughly 2 million people licensed to sell real estate in the United States, and we have 1.1 million members. So there are 900,000 other licensed real estate people who are not part of our organization. And lastly, there's another sort of amusing item that people think of us. The Realtor R used to be perceived as standing for Republican, and of course that's further from the truth. Consistently for the last decade, we have lobbied and advocated and contributed to candidates in Capitol Hill, and the percentage breakdown is 52% Republican, 48% Democrat. So we believe we represent the Realtor Party, not the Republican or the Democratic parties.
Well, it's interesting, and I certainly paid attention to this during what will be historically known as the Depression, I imagine. It certainly affected our industry, and nobody else, and this is a thing, Dale, that agents don't clearly understand. As far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm often wrong, just ask my wife, but there's nobody else in Washington, D.C. that is lobbying lawmakers that is literally there for one of the main purposes of protecting our industry, i.e., realtors' ability to make a living. Without the National Association of Realtors, especially during this housing bust, there could have been many opportunities for realtors to be more put back on our heels. So folks don't seem to understand that the critical role that the association plays in literally protecting not just homeownership rights, but our livelihoods. Is there anything how can we do a better job putting the word out that you guys really are protecting us and our livelihoods?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and one that we talk about all the time, because we're always talking about our value proposition, and part and parcel of that is those two key fundamental points: the helping them in their business and private property rights. One of the ways that we've attempted to do it for about 15 years is our consumer awareness campaign, which is a polite phrase for the advertising campaign that all the commercials on TV and radio that we run. And we move our message around from time to time depending on what's going on with the consumer base who we're trying to attract. During the depths of the downturn, if you will, our messaging turned to the value of home ownership and the value of real estate ownership, because everybody was trashing real estate and saying what a horrible investment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, 5-6 years into it, of course, everything has come back pretty well, and people begin to see that not only is real estate a good investment, but you get to live in this one. So this is the kind of messaging that we try to put out to the consumer, and we also are always trying to relate to the consumer the difference between a realtor and a real estate licensee, because a realtor in the dictionary, in Webster's dictionary, is defined as a member of the National Association of Realtors, which means you ascribe to a code of ethics and professional standards, whereas the real estate licensees do not have to. So we tried very hard over the last 5 or 6 years to not have realtors get blamed for the crisis. And, the appraisers got whacked, the title guys, the mortgage companies, the bankers, and I think we did a pretty good job over the 5 or 6 year period of keeping realtors from getting pulled into that blame game.
The National Association of Realtors campaign that you guys came out with, showing how getting away from buying a home as strictly as an investment, reminding folks that it's a place to live and investment is secondary, was brilliant. And that's probably that campaign in particular. I remember the first time I saw one of those commercials, I thought, Julie and I sold real estate in Ohio, and you did not sell real estate for the most part as an investment in Ohio, because if you're lucky, it kept up with the rate of inflation as far as its quote-unquote appreciation. And, our country kind of got maybe a little bit too far down the road that buying a home is like owning a winning lottery ticket. That campaign that you guys came out with was brilliant. I just hope the National Association of Realtors stays on message with homeownership being primarily about owning a home, a secure place for your family, and stays away from the allure of looking at it as an investment vehicle, because that's where the problems start, I think, with confusing consumers. But in any event, that's my soapbox. Sorry for that. So looking back over your career, what were some of the big moments, either personal or industry-wide, that jump out at you? I can't imagine. I'd be interested to know if it had something more significant than the real estate crash.
Yeah, well, having gone back as far as I do, this crash was the third in my history at NAR. So
wow.
It tends to go through a 7-year cycle. This one might have been the most severe, but this is the third one that I have experienced. And so it's not like we got used to it, but it is something we have seen before. But going back, I will say 18 years ago when we invented Realtor.com as a real estate portal, now of course there's competition and others in the space, but back then when everybody was trying to figure out what the internet was and where it was going, when we created Realtor.com as a portal for listing data, that was a pretty seminal event in organized real estate. There was another one that we've fought for 7 years and finally succeeded this past decade, which was to keep banks out of real estate. There was a lot of lobbying on Capitol Hill for banks to be allowed to own real estate businesses and get into that. Imagine what this real estate recession bordering on depression would have looked like if the banks owned real estate companies. It would have been a nightmare, and we were successful in getting Congress to pass legislation that forbids them from owning real estate companies. Another one I have referred to a few minutes ago was the Realtor Party. About 5 years ago, we started officially something called the Realtor Party because we were figuring out that on Capitol Hill in Washington, where we have a goodly number of lobbyists and advocates, we were doing a pretty good job of protecting private property rights and keeping everybody's home ownership values stable. But what we were finding is at the state and local level, the attacks were coming. So we had them shut down federally, but then they were sort of coming in the back door. So we invented the Realtor Party about 5 years ago, which is a massive campaign to fit up every local association in the country, of which there's 1,400 of them, to be a campaign headquarters for the Realtor Party and begin to advocate for real estate at the state and local level so that we had all the bases covered. Then lastly, this one I have to say because it's a recent one, the recent acquisition by Move, who is the company that we have the operating agreement with to run Realtor.com, that acquisition by News Corp last month took about 6 months of my life, but we're very high on the potential for News Corp to take them yet to another level. So those are some pretty big moments.
Dale, even though we didn't have News Corp questions on our list, can we talk a little bit about that? Because that is something all of our listeners are really interested in.
Happy to.
So, okay, excellent. So I don't want to. I have my own opinions. What's going to come of that? I've shared those with our listeners on the radio show. I mean, now that News Corp owns Move.com, runs whatever the legal term for it is, along with ListHub, and that puts them in an unbelievably powerful position that they could hypothetically turn off the spigot of listings from ListHub to the other portals. I mean, all kinds of things could possibly happen. But what are the expectations of the National Association of Realtors now that we have News Corp on our side? What do you think is going to happen? What is expected to happen because of this new relationship?
I think the part that people are missing that is the most exciting about it, and you can talk about the other portals, and you can talk about competition, you can talk about ListHub and syndication and all those things, but I think what people are missing is that this is the first time ever you've seen the largest trade association in the world combined with the number 3 portal in the space matched up with a platinum level media company that knows how to deliver messaging and branding to the consumer. But even that, if you got that far, and you could see that trilogy, that triumvirate, is a very strong, unique, not just additive relationship, but a new basis for approaching the consumer. What's missing is that this is going to be a global play. The News Corp and Realtor.com, NAR has 85 relationships with associations in 85 countries around the world. People forget about that. We have hundreds of thousands of, they like to call themselves realtors, even though it's our own trademark. It's kind of hard to defend it in Italy and France and other places. But we intend with News Corp, which is a global media company, to provide the listing data of our members globally, and in return create a global marketplace for our members. Now, somebody from Des Moines, Iowa, will say, "Well, big deal. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. I don't care about the global market." Well, they will. Last year alone, $92 billion of foreign money came into this country buying residential real estate. So we're ideally placed for the next generation of portals and of listing syndication and of presenting a fair and a value proposition to the consumer that their property is going to get the absolute best marketing it can.
What's been the feedback from members about their fears about the News Corp acquisition? What are you hearing that you would like to put out there as far as what the feedback you're getting from members, what they're scared of happening as a result?
What I really thank you for that question, because I'd like to dispel yet another myth that somehow we're going to lose control of Realtor.com. Realtor.com is a term that NAR owns the term realtor. Has, always will, no one can take it from us. There's an operating agreement with a company called Move, which has been acquired by News Corp, to operate that website. That website is the primary consumer-facing vehicle by which NAR and its members present listing data. The myth is that somehow News Corp, because they're so big and massive and great at what they do, that they're going to somehow overwhelm Realtor.com or turn it into something that will not be good for our members or the consumer. The best way I can say it is they would not have paid $1 billion to destroy something. They would not have paid over $1 billion, and they're going to put a lot more money into a better consumer experience to turn it into something that consumers and realtors don't like. So that plus I'll be even more specific with you about fear. News Corp has some of the finest attorneys in the world. Well, guess what? So does NAR. We have some of the finest attorneys in Chicago, inside and outside. We are quite confident that the operating agreement spells out the terms and conditions by which News Corp Move can operate Realtor.com. And many, if not all of them, are the same ones we had before the acquisition. So we're quite comfortable that no one's going to be taken advantage of, but that the opportunities to get back to number one and to present a marketing point of view for our members with consumers is second to none because of their media and branding capabilities.
So get back to number one. I love that aspect of it, because that's where Realtor.com has to be. It has to be the dominant portal. It has to be the place where consumers go to look at homes for sale. And you know what's interesting? Agents don't understand that Realtor.com, even though they're running commercials for this, Realtor.com does have more up-to-date information about homes for sale. And maybe that's another major focus of News Corp, putting the word out that our information is the freshest, it's the most up-to-date. And agents, you guys need to recognize that too. So if you're going to be investing money on buying leads, you need to seriously consider investing money in buying leads in the company that's actually going to support our industry, and versus basically, not supporting the industry in the way that we would like to have it happen. So I did hear you say get back to number one, and I assume that was one of News Corp's stated goals. Any ideas or anything you feel comfortable talking about as far as their plans and how they're going to do that, how quick we're going to see a difference? I mean, that's what I think our listeners want to know. as far as the News Corp acquisition, what are we going to see? How soon are we going to see it? And agents, they don't want to feel like they're being beholden to Zillow and Trulia anymore. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
Yeah, great question. I think it's hard to predict when they'll see the exact changes, in the sense that the deal just closed less than a month ago, and obviously they couldn't really work on anything until then. So it's really quite new. But I can tell you that the number one conversation was creating a much better consumer experience on the site. And
Good.
They have some experience with that in Australia, and in fact, they own a site in Italy, and you'll see 2 or 3 other countries that they have taken a similar position in, again, because of their global vision for this. But they recognize, and we recognize, that the consumer experience has to be infinitely better than it is now to attract the eyeballs and to get the stickiness to the site. But at the same time, there's a fundamental thing about listing data. People just sometimes want to know, is it available, and the basics of it, and they don't want to know a whole lot more other than that. In fact, I get lots of inquiries from people or comments from people that tell me when they're done looking at all the infotainment they get on the other sites, that when they're ready to buy, they come to Realtor.com.
Well, but the infotainment on the other sites is hurting our brand. There's no two ways
Sure.
about it. The
and
false
that's where
the outdated information, it's infuriating for, this, you hear this more than I do, but our coaching clients having to overcome all the infotainment, as you said, that's so frustrating. Can I ask you a question? You can feel free to take a complete pass on this, and our listeners will understand.
Sure.
Okay, so
sure. We didn't rehearse this. We didn't rehearse this. Yeah.
I know we didn't. Remember, you're the one that went off our script, so. But if you don't want to answer this question, I completely understand. Why doesn't ListHub just stop syndicating listings to Trulia and Zillow? Wouldn't that, in essence, basically cut off the very lifeblood that they need to get eyeballs on their sites, thus ending this really sometimes adversarial relationship between National Association of members and these other sites? I mean, why doesn't ListHub just say enough is enough? Or why doesn't Move.com say, hey, ListHub, enough is enough? And remember, you can pass on that question.
I'm happy to answer it, because there's a very factual answer to that. Here's how it works. ListHub has data content provider agreements with MLSs. MLSs get their instructions from brokers as to where they want their listings to go. So the broker tells the MLS, I want it here, and I want it here, and I want it here. ListHub must respect the MLS's content agreements and send it where the broker asks it to be sent.
Okay, that makes sense. So will News Corp have the same level of agreement or same level of understanding of those agreements? In other words, will they follow those rules? Is that part of the continuation of the operation agreements that you guys had them agree to? Is that what you're telling me?
No. The ListHub is a separate corporation owned by Move, and therefore not subject to the operating agreement with Realtor.com. So right. NAR has no say in how ListHub is operated. I'm just telling you what I know about how they're operating, which is they're respecting what the brokers of the country are asking them to do.
No, I understand. We had the ListHub head person on the radio show, and she explained that too. But from the National Association of Realtors perspective, when they understand their relationship between ListHub and Trulia and Zillow, and they're going on listing appointments, and they're getting feedback about what's my home worth, not being in alignment with what the true market value is, and all these added objections and issues that they're having. Then they go back and realize that ListHub is the one that is providing information. It's confusing, and I think that members are already asking questions, and it'll be very interesting to see from a competitive perspective, since it would be the best left hook ever. I mean, it would be interesting to see if News Corp is planning on either limiting further or just completely cutting off the feed to those those portals. And so there you go. You answered the question though the way that.
If I can offer one thing, while they respect the other portals, they are slaves to their customer, and if their customer is the broker, they'll do what the broker tells them to do. Now, if the broker tells them they don't want them there anymore, that's a different question, isn't it? The brokerage community has to make a decision about marketing and how it provides the listing data to who. And we have always taken a market-driven approach to this in terms of our influence in the marketplace. We go right up to the brink, but we're not going to step into the chasm and tell the industry, frankly, how brokers should conduct their business, because that is their business, and we're here just to help them in it, but not to tell them how to do it.
So what I'm hearing you say is, at the end of the day, if the brokers want this to change, they have to be the change. They have to be the ones that maybe just on an MLS basis say, we no longer want it. We at least want the option of not providing information here or there or wherever. So really, at the end of the day, and you got to respect that, because your members of the brokers and whatnot, they're all individual business owners, and they have the ability to make their own decisions about what's best for their businesses. That makes perfect sense.
Right, and remember, you got your large broker versus your small broker. There's a lot of dynamics. Some are employees, some are independent. So there's a lot of variables that go into a broker's decision about where to list and provide their data. Let me offer you one other point of view about NAR in the marketplace, though. There is some myth and confusion about the portals and whether we consider them friends or enemies. Fundamentally, take it to the bank. Here's how we feel about it. We like the competition. I just wish there were 10 more like them. I want as many portals and as many people producing products and services for our members. I want them fighting over our members like crazy so that our members get the best possible services. And if that comes from a competitor, then so be it. So it might be odd for you to hear that, but I am a big fan of the more the merrier.
No, it makes sense. And not to mention the fact that there's more people putting information about homes for sale. It's going to whet the appetite of potential buyers and sellers. And at the end of the day, there's more real estate transactions. So that makes complete sense. Yeah.
90% of every home sold in this country is sold by a realtor.
Yeah, really. So if we can get more people motivated because they come across a nice website, then that's all the better.
Right.
In the time we have remaining, I'm curious, what are you seeing? What's going to surprise, hopefully in a positive way, the industry in the next 12 months? What's on the horizon that you're excited about?
Well, the obvious one, of course, is the News Corp acquisition, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think 2015 will be a threshold year for portal activity. So that's number one. We're very concerned about where new home ownership is going to come from, the young folks, or just in terms of getting on the ladder and moving up the ladder. And an issue for us there that we're very concerned about is the whole student debt situation, which is $1 trillion problem, and preventing a lot of young folks from considering home ownership. So we're focused pretty hard on that. We also look into 2015 and see that on Capitol Hill they're going to be talking about taxation again. We're hopeful that they confine their considerations in next year to corporate tax reform. But there has been talk for 5 or 6 or 7 years now, and frankly for many years before that, but it heated up with the recession, about mortgage interest deduction and other tax preference items for real estate. So we're ever vigilant on that front to make sure that we get fair and equitable treatment there, and that we protect every homeowner's right to own property, and the items in the tax code when it started that have been there for almost 100 years related to deductions, et cetera. So that's a big item. Of course, there'll be a lot of conversation about incubators, startups, crowdsourcing, funding, who else is getting into the space. That's always fun to see because, as I said, I love it when a successful startup makes some headway and begins to get the funding to provide services for our members. So I think you're going to see that. But the big issue for us with all that, having said all that, is available capital. We've got to get the banks to start loaning again. We've just worked with Fannie and Freddie to lower some of the limits there for providing mortgages, and now they're providing 5% and 10% loans again. And we're working very hard with them to be rational about it so that we don't find ourselves getting ahead of the game again and people speculating, and that recognizing that a home is first and foremost to be lived in and not to be viewed as the investment of the next century. You know, I live in the Chicago area, have all my life, and we get 5% appreciation a year in a good market, and we're thrilled with that because when the market goes down, we don't go down 30%, and we don't go up 30%. We like a good, stable return on our investment, but mostly we like the fact that we're living in it. And home ownership is a different animal than you have to think about when it comes to this investment issue. Home ownership creates community. Home ownership, people with home ownership, and not to cast aspersions on rental folks, because frankly, we're for them too, because somebody owns the real estate they're renting. But the point is, home ownership consistently delivers lower crime rates, better schools, better grades, better opportunities. There's a list of 20 things I can tell you that home ownership does in the community that binds it together, and that's why we do what we do.
Well, it's all that. It's more stable families. It's more stable communities. It's more stable, right? I've read those reports, and they're brilliant. And folks need to, really. That's a great. Every agent, every member should have those points memorized, or at least have them in printed form to pass out to their clients, because it really does. It paints a picture that I think you were talking about, the idea of getting rid of the mortgage interest tax deduction. Every time that comes up, I always ask myself, why are they making that a political hot button? I mean, at the end of the day, what's the whole point of even making that an issue? People say, well, it's an entitlement, and you know what? Maybe it is. But the fact is if you look at all the benefits for it's not really that significant in terms of the amount of taxes that someone would or wouldn't be. I mean, the amount of money that they're saving is significant to them. The amount of money, the added money that the government would get if it didn't exist versus the benefit that the government gets and our society gets, it just seems to me like it's a red herring of an argument. So, yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Let me give you the articulated Wall Street answer, though. Real estate is 22% of the gross national product. So if you just want to put it on those terms alone, it creates a heck of a lot of jobs and creates a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, very interesting. And it is kind of, we're in a trend. You said something before, Dale, and I don't mean to go back like 5 questions, but it's worth repeating. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Jonathan Smoke from Realtor.com, or maybe it was one of our other guests, pointed out the fact that real estate has a tendency to go to a 7 to 10 year cycle. And that if you will go back 20, 30 years, you'll see that it has a tendency to have little booms and little busts, and that statistically that we should be right in the very beginning stages of another 7 to 10 year cycle. Do you see it that way? Is that the viewpoint from the National Association?
It is hard to answer that just yes or no, in the sense that it is very true that the 5 or 6 years we're just coming out of, there has never been anything like it other than the Great Depression. So my tendency is to think it may take a little longer than that, but I think your 10 years is probably a fairer estimate of that. But it all depends on capital. The world revolves around the money, and it all depends on how tight or how loose the availability of capital is for the average homeowner and the average consumer, and if there's and the economy that goes with it. So it's almost an articulation of what you think the economy is going to look like for the next 10 years. And I frankly think our economy over the next 7 to 10 years is going to be stable, but not setting anything on fire. And frankly, I'm not bothered by that. I think a return to stability in our economy and everything we do is everybody would like to have things calm down a bit.
Absolutely. So are there any questions that I should have asked you that I didn't? Anything else you'd like to say to our 50,000-ish listeners that we have every month?
Well, I have to tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you, and would be happy to come on some other time if you would invite me. But I do want to say one thing about what we're trying to do. This past year in 2014, we did a very important thing with some of the work done at NAR at the November convention. We passed a proposal to have our members aspire. It isn't mandatory because we have a code of ethics, which is mandatory, but to aspire to a code of excellence, to aspire to being even better than they are, to really be the best they can be. And we're going to be working real hard on that in 2015 to articulate what that means to everybody. But really, it's a stake in the ground telling everybody that we're not going to rest on our laurels. We think the term realtor is an incredible brand. We think our members are some of the most incredible people in the country, if not the world, because of how they are part of every community. But this code of excellence that we're talking about is just raising the bar yet one more notch to let the consumer know that we're not going to rest until they get the best housing experience they can possibly have.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And, it's interesting. I'm glad the fact, Dale, that you were so forthcoming in saying that National Association of Realtors, primary job is to protect homeownerships and obviously protect real estate agents, realtors in their businesses, because a lot of people are sheepish about that. And I appreciate the fact that you were so direct in that statement. And it's interesting, if you look strictly, if you are somebody who is, say, just out of college or in your late 20s, early 30s, and you're thinking about a career path to follow, and maybe you have an entrepreneurial bent, I cannot think of anything better than getting a real estate license. I mean, if you think about all the upside, all the potential opportunity, everything that our industry has to offer, that's something I'm excited about. I'm excited about the number of people that are going to wake up to realize that real estate is an incredible career path, is an incredible way to really have a fantastic lifestyle and make a true contribution to your community. And, you're no better, I can't think of any better example than you and your long career protecting our industry. And Dale, I really sincerely appreciate you being on our radio show today.
Well, I had a great time, and I thank you all very much.
And we'll definitely have you back, so we're going to hold you to that. And next time, let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty stuff, some of the little obscure facts and whatnot that members don't know about the National Association. Because I think we should. Let's do a
MythBusters show.
I was about to say that. Okay, that's the theme. So the next radio show we do with you will be the MythBuster one. That'll be great.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Dale, and thank you, listeners. And we'll talk with you on the radio tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.